Okay, let's get into this. You know that that connection you have with your dog, that
Yeah.
amazing like unspoken thing,
Mm.
the way they just get you that look. And then maybe just sometimes that little thought pops in, knowing their time is, well, shorter than ours.
Yeah, it's definitely something dog owners think about. It's precious time.
It really is. And that feeling, I think, is especially relevant for you listening today, particularly if you're a dedicated dog lover. One review we looked at actually asked, how does one explain death to a dog? Which is, wow.
It's a heavy question, right? And it
That
says so much about how deep that bond goes.
exactly. And that question kind of sets the scene for our deep dive today. We are looking closely at the 2024 film The Friend.
Hmm.
Now, the basic idea a woman inherits her dead friend's Great Dane might sound, I don't know, simple, but trust me, especially for anyone who gets the ups and downs of having a dog, this film uh, seems to dig much deeper.
It really does try to. And this is definitely a film that resonates differently if you have that canine perspective.
For sure, and we've gathered quite a bit of insight on it.
Yeah, we looked through Variety, Baltimore Magazine, Awards Radar, Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, Roger Ebert, The Guardian.
The great folks at Dog with Blog, Letterbox, New York Magazine, plus the basics from Wikipedia and IMDb.
A good range.
Right. So our goal today is to really pull out the key emotional threads of The Friend, especially the stuff that'll hit home for dog lovers. We want to figure out what makes it maybe more than just another dog movie. So where does it all start for Iris?
Okay, so the main character is Iris, played by Naomi Watts. She's a writer, lives alone, pretty solitary life in Greenwich Village.
Okay.
And her world gets turned upside down when her friend and mentor figure, Walter Meredith, as Bill Murray, dies by suicide.
Right. That's a heavy starting point. And Walter wasn't just some casual friend, was he?
No, he's described as this widely admired old school author,
Hmm?
but also kind of a complicated figure personally.
Hmm.
You know, affairs, multiple ex-wives, apparently a daughter he only recently acknowledged. So all that adds complexity to Iris's grief.
Yeah, it's not just mourning a friend, it's mourning this friend with all that baggage. But the real kicker is what he leaves her, right?
Exactly. He leaves his Great Dane, Apollo, to Iris.
And we're not talking about a chihuahua here.
No, definitely not. Sources like Baltimore Magazine and Variety mention he's somewhere between 150 and 180 pounds, a very large dog.
Which immediately creates this huge practical problem for Iris.
A massive one.
Ugh.
Because, as several places point out, she lives in this small, rent-controlled New York apartment.
Where pets are completely forbidden.
Right. So suddenly she's got this enormous grieving dog in a place she could get kicked out of. It's instant stress and comedy in a dark way.
You can just picture it. Trying to sneak a dog that size around, it's quite the setup for conflict.
It really is. It makes it clear this inheritance is going to be, well, a lot for her to handle.
A handful feels like an understatement. But Apollo, he's not just like a plot device or a big furry problem. He's central emotionally too, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. That's a key point in reviews from Baltimore Magazine and Awards Radar. Apollo is grieving too,
Yeah.
deeply.
How does that show?
Well, classic signs dog owners would recognize. He stops eating, he doesn't want to play, he apparently just takes over Iris's bed looking for comfort.
Poor guy.
Yeah, and this shared grief, this kind of mutual mourning, becomes this really powerful unspoken connection between Iris and Apollo.
That makes sense. They're both lost without Walter. And the dog actor, Bing, who plays Apollo, sounds like he did an amazing job.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Baltimore Magazine, Awards Radar, New York Magazine, they all rave about Bing's performance. They say he's incredibly expressive.
Really?
Yeah, like he genuinely conveys sadness and builds this believable bond with Naomi Watts. Baltimore Magazine even jokingly called him the Daniel Dog Lewis for a limping scene later on.
Uh-huh. Daniel Dog Lewis, I love that. So he really sells the emotion.
It seems like it. He's not just the dog, he's a character experiencing loss.
And it sounds like through dealing with Apollo's grief, Iris starts dealing with her own stuff.
That seems to be the core idea, yeah. Reviews in Variety, Awards Radar, Dog with Blog, Rotten Tomatoes, they all suggest that caring for Apollo, focusing on his needs, kind of forces Iris to confront her own grief for Walter.
Hmm.
And also maybe look at her own life, her own, emotional state, her writing.
So by looking after this vulnerable creature,
She starts to tend to her own vulnerabilities. It gives her maybe a path through the grief, a focus.
that's a really interesting dynamic. So it's not a romance, but it becomes this other kind of intense relationship.
Precisely. Baltimore Magazine and The Guardian call it out. The film focuses on this growing reliance, this affection between human and dog.
Yeah.
It's presented as a different kind of love story.
And for dog lovers listening, that probably rings very true. They become family, these anchors in our lives, especially when things get tough, which ties into the bigger themes, I guess.
Definitely. Grief and mortality are huge themes here. Some explores how we cope with humans losing humans, but also implicitly, pets losing their humans.
Right, like that variety question again. How do you explain it to them? You see their sadness, their confusion, but you can't just talk it through.
Exactly. It highlights that really unique, sometimes heartbreaking challenge.
And there was another interesting angle on grief mentioned, something about pre-grieving.
Yeah, Variety brought that up. They suggested the film is almost an exercise in pre-grieving for Iris, because Apollo is 5 years old when she gets him.
Okay.
For a Great Dane, that means he's already, getting on a bit, closer to the end of his natural lifespan.
Ah, right. Wow.
So as Iris bonds with him, there's this underlying awareness that this profound connection also has a limited time, which might really hit home for anyone who cherishes an older dog.
Oh, absolutely. That constant knowledge that their time is shorter makes every moment feel, well, more intense, more precious. Now, shifting slightly, Walter's background as a writer is important too, right? It's not just about the dog.
No, his literary world is part of the texture. He was Iris's mentor.
Hmm.
Variety mentions they had this shared dark humor and intellectual bond. And we learn from Baltimore Magazine and The Guardian that Iris actually starts working with Walter's daughter, Val, on a book of his letters.
Interesting. So even though he's gone, his words, his legacy are still very present.
Exactly. It's a way for Iris to continue processing her relationship with him, and it also connects her with his daughter.
So it's not just Iris and Apollo alone in their grief bubble. There are these other human connections, maybe complicated ones, swirling around.
Right. Several reviews mention this network of women, ex-wives, the daughter, all linked by Walter's life and death. It shows how one person's absence ripples outwards.
Paints a broader picture of loss and connection. Okay, so with all these elements, what was the overall verdict from critics? Did they like The Friend?
Generally, yes. The reception was largely positive. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 82% fresh.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, and their consensus highlights the adorable human-canine bonding and how it resonates, especially if you've known loss or loved a pet. Metacritic gave it a 72, which is generally favorable.
Solid scores. But were there any common criticisms? It wasn't universally loved.
Not universally, no. Some recurring points mentioned in Variety, Awards Radar, Baltimore Magazine, Letterboxd, were about the pacing. Some found it a bit long, maybe slow in parts,
Okay.
and a few felt that some subplots, like maybe those involving the other women in Walter's life, weren't quite as compelling or well-developed as the central Iris-Apollo relationship.
That kind of makes sense. If that main bond is so strong, other things might feel secondary. But it also sounds like it wasn't aiming to be just a sweet, simple dog movie.
Exactly. That's a point made by New York Magazine and Roger Ebert. They described it as more literary, more nuanced, maybe an elevated dog movie.
Elevated dog movie, I like that.
Yeah, focusing more on character depth and the complexities of grief rather than just, easy sentimentality.
So for our listeners, maybe especially those connected with Dog with Blog, it sounds like it offers something thoughtful about that human-animal connection, not just fluff.
That seems to be the takeaway.
Were there specific details that reviews pointed out as being particularly resonant for dog people?
Definitely. The realistic portrayal of just like the logistics of having a huge dog in a tiny forbidden apartment that was noted as being relatable.
Yeah, the daily struggles.
And also the emotional realism, that connection with a grieving animal, trying to figure out what they need, that really seemed to land.
That feeling of trying to help them when they can't tell you what's wrong.
Exactly. And of course, the praise for Bing's performance as Apollo comes up again and again.
Yeah.
People were clearly very impressed by how expressive he was. Some called it a truly standout animal performance.
It makes such a difference when the animal actor feels authentic, doesn't it? It pulls you in more.
It really does. Oh, and one other lovely detail mentioned by Baltimore Magazine and Dog with Blog.
Yeah.
Iris apparently starts reading to Apollo from Walter's own books and letters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, as a way to comfort him, maybe with the familiar sound and rhythm of Walter's words. It's a really touching idea about connection beyond just physical presence. Using sound, familiarity.
That's beautiful. It really speaks to finding unique ways to bridge that communication gap and offer comfort. Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive on The Friend, what are the main things that stand out?
I think it's clear The Friend tries to offer this really nuanced look at grief, at loss, and importantly, at the kind of unexpected comfort and healing that can come from a bond with an animal. It seems to go beyond the standard dog movie formula to explore some pretty deep human and canine emotions. For dog lovers especially, it sounds like a poignant reflection on just how significant these relationships are and how intertwined our lives become, especially when facing loss together.
Absolutely. It really validates that feeling that our dogs aren't just pets. They're profound emotional partners, especially in tough times. It sounds like it captures that transition.
And maybe for everyone listening, it's a chance to think about your own dog or dogs you've known. How has that unique bond helped you? What comfort have you found there? Apollo's story seems to invite that kind of reflection on the huge impact these animals have.
It really does. It's definitely food for thought. So if this sounds like your kind of film, we absolutely encourage you to check out The Friend
See it for yourself?
and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear what resonated most with you about Iris and Apollo's story and the way the film handled grief. Your perspectives are always welcome.